May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be pleasing to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. To be chosen, it is one of the greatest longings of our hearts. And to hear that we were chosen from before time began, that God chose to form us and call us into being even before we were conceived, that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. This is a word that we all need to hear. The psalm we read today is one of my favorites because its theology of divine love and divine presence is both comforting and bracing. To be chosen. It makes us feel wanted and special, but it can also be terrifying. I think of the series Lord of the Rings and Frodo's eventual lamentation that he was the one chosen to bear the ring and end its terrible reign. I wish it need not have happened in my time, said Frodo. So do I, said Gandalf, and so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. As we start to read the story of the disciples being chosen this week, I wonder if they felt that mixture of joy and awe at being chosen, and if they also had their Frodo moments of wishing Jesus had chosen anyone else for the tasks they took on as they ministered alongside Jesus. We are each fearfully and wonderfully made. We are each chosen by God to live in this time and this place. And when we take on the name of Christian, which just means Christ follower, we are called to be disciples of Christ, to minister alongside him, just as his disciples did 2,000 years ago. That is awesome in the original meaning of that word. Amazing, but also terrifyingly awe-inspiring. What are we to do with being chosen by God? What are we to do with the time we have been given? As tomorrow is Martin Luther King Jr. Day, I want to delve a little into his theology and his teachings to answer that question, because I think they are a perfect lesson about what we are called to do as disciples who have chosen and been chosen by Christ. We know what Jesus says the two greatest commandments are: to love God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself. Dr. King called this building the beloved community, and he too believed that love was the key. Before he was one of the world's greatest social activists, Dr. King was a theologian, a philosopher, and a pastor, and his theology of love was at the core of the entire social movement he helped engineer, especially his concept of agape, which he saw as being at the very center of justice work. He said, "Agape is disinterested love. It is a love in which the individual seeks not his own good, but the good of his neighbor. Agape does not begin by discriminating between worthy and unworthy people or any qualities people possess. It begins by loving others for their sakes. It is an entirely neighbor-regarding concern for others, which discovers the neighbor in every man it meets. Therefore, agape makes no distinction between friend and enemy. It is directed toward both." He goes on to say, another basic point about agape is that it springs from the need of the other person, his need for belonging to the best in the human family. And Dr. King argued that those who oppress others are especially in need of agape because racism has so deeply scarred their souls and broken their ability to belong to true community, the human family that we are all called to be a part of. Agape, King says, is not a weak, passive love. It is love in action. Agape is love seeking to preserve and create community. It is insistent on community, even when one seeks to break it. Agape is a willingness to go to any length to restore community. In fact, for Dr. King, God created the world to be a vast, interrelated, beloved community, a community held together by divine love. And God created each one of us to be a part of that beloved community. If we break it or break ourselves away from it, we do terrible harm not only to the world as it is meant to be, but even to ourselves, as we cannot be who we are meant to be except in the context of being loved and loving in beloved community. And of course, we know Dr. King didn't mean having warm, fuzzy feelings for people when he said love. He also did not mean niceness or capitulating to evil when he said love. He meant the kind of love that will strive for the good of the whole by resisting the evil of oppression with all of its strength. And he reserved some of his strongest words for white preachers who thought he should love others by standing down and not continuing his fight for justice. For Dr. King, sometimes loving an enemy meant resisting them and fighting against the racism in them that destroyed not only the world around them, but their own selves. But it meant doing it with a regard for the dignity of that human person and who they were meant to be. And he never wavered from believing that love, not hate, must always inspire resistance and work for justice. We know that King and countless others who fought and still fight for civil rights endured and still endure unspeakable hatred and violence. King's house was bombed. His life was threatened and ultimately ended. When he said he believed in loving his neighbor, even when his neighbor was an enemy, we know that meant something frighteningly concrete. It's easy to say, oh, please meet hate with love and love even your enemy when you don't have enemies who wish you dead. But King did, and he still believed in loving them, not having sweet, warm feelings for them, but resisting them with that powerful agape and calling them and the whole world into beloved community. I have always wondered how King managed to maintain his philosophy of agape and nonviolence and inspire so many others toward it, given all he endured and lost and suffered. Then I came upon one of his early sermons, preached likely in 1954, and when I read it, a light went on. Maybe Dr. King knew a love so boundless that he could tap into that and from that wellspring, love others. In that sermon, he said, even there might be a day when the stars cease to bedeck the heavens, but the love of God will be there. Man's love might waver and even dry up, but God's love will be there. God's love is eternal. And King says in that sermon that all of that love, that eternal, unconditional love of God is for infinitesimal me, for infinitesimal you, for all of us. If we do not have a love to tap into that is bigger than the love our own hearts can create, we are doomed if we are trying to seek justice guided by agape. If we do not know ourselves to be loved unconditionally, we cannot offer agape to others. Christian writer Jane Bernard puts it this way: if we forget that God is the source of our love, we deplete ourselves and end up serving from our emptiness rather than our fullness. This occurs not only when we forget to turn to God to be filled with love, but also when we forget to treat ourselves with the same love and compassion with which we treat our neighbors. If we are truly to love our neighbors, even our enemy neighbors, as ourselves, well, we can't do that without drawing from a deep well of love. A love that, as the Psalm says, extends to the heavens, and Romans says is so strong that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, neither height nor depth, nor any powers, nor anything else in all creation can break it. I know so many of you are already engaged in building the beloved community. This kind of work is incredibly hard work, especially if we seek to approach it from a place of agape. So let us do this work with love for even our enemy neighbor, as Jesus and Dr. King both called us to do. But do not forget that love is always already here, there, everywhere, building alongside, holding us, calling for us to dive deep and refresh ourselves so that we can love as we are also loved. Only then can we do the kind of work that Dr. King inspired people to do and still inspires us to do today. Only then can we build that beloved community at the heart of which beats love beyond understanding. You are loved. You are chosen. You are fearfully and wonderfully made by the God who is with us, whether we are in the heavens, have descended to the depths, are on the wings of the dawn, or flee to the far side of the seas. The God who is with us always and everywhere chooses us for love and then chooses us to go out and do the work of love. On this weekend, celebrating Dr. King's legacy, and every day, let us go out and do that great work of agape, and let us delve deep into God's love for us, taking in all that love and then giving it to others with all of our hearts. Amen.